All right, we are rolling again. Welcome back to the podcast again, my friends. To you who are listening, I don't have my glasses today. If you can see me on YouTube, I think I'm going to try and publish this one on Spotify and all the other apps. I have a little bit more listeners on those platforms, but it's a really long process now that I have YouTube involved to get everything uploaded. So I'm thinking about just transitioning primarily just to YouTube because, that's where I listen to most of my podcasts anyways. So if you can see me, I lost my glasses in the ocean. I just decided to throw them. And never see them again. So I don't have my glasses today because my new ones are coming in. So that's a little bit disappointing. So if you notice me squinting or anything, it's probably because I can't see and I might be getting a headache or whatever. So let's get to today's episode, which is truth, my friends. This episode is another foundational episode to our topic. Is God real? So last week, we talked about a few weeks ago, identity and why this topic is so important because you basically, and Jordan Peterson just mentioned this in his Jubilee episode, he says, you live and you die for what you believe. And while he could have phrased it a little bit differently, I agree with what he's saying there. So ultimately, what you believe is going to shape the rest of your life, right? And so last episode, we talked about knowledge. Can you have knowledge? And we came to a conclusion. There is different types of knowledge and how you can know something through experience or through logic, basically, were the two main points there. So we discussed the importance of having both when coming to a conclusion and how they both are very important. So today's episode is about truth. And in today's world, truth often feels more like an opinion, more like an opinion than a fact. But is that sustainable? That's the question I want to ask. So in today's society, and I know I say that a lot, I feel like what I've observed, I guess, is that truth is mainly an opinion rather than a fact. But is this sustainable, and what are the different views on truth, stuff like that? So what happens when we treat everything as subjective, which is what the world is basically doing right now? Everybody has their own truth, right? But what happens when we treat everything as subjective? And I'm looking down because I'm looking down at my notes. I know, it's terrible. In this episode, we're breaking that down. We're going to be breaking down the different views on truth and how you can have truth and know truth and stuff like that. Because how we define truth is going to affect everything from personal belief to our search for God. So I think this is a foundational episode and a topic that I have spent so much time into. You guys have no idea. You probably know. I tell you every week just about that. I spend so much time on my episodes, but I've been reading Aristotle, Plato. I just got some Nietzsche for morality, the next topic, I believe. I have looked at a bunch of different beliefs and views on this topic. I've, watched debates over, too many to count. All right. And so we are going to get into it. So let's do it. So I know this might sound a bit nerdy or abstract, what is truth? Most people don't really care about that. It seems like a very basic topic, but it is so important to define your terms when you're getting into a topic so big. So we have to define our terms and how we're going to move forward. And so that is why we are going through this. What is truths. I would define truth as, and I guess other dictionaries and stuff would agree with me, that which is in accordance with reality. And so that means that if something is actually the way you say it is true. And if not, it's false. So that which is in accordance with reality. So this isn't just my opinion, and Aristotle put it this way. He says, to say of what is that is not, or of what is not that is false. But to say of what is that is, and of what is not that is not, is true. So that's basically what I just said, just in a more complicated way. Aldous Huxley says, facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. So if I say there's coffee in my mug, and there actually is, then I'm telling the truth. But this may sound so simple, but it gets complicated when we introduce feelings and beliefs and social norms into the mix. That's where it gets confusing. So obviously, if I say there's coffee in my mug, and there is coffee in my mug, I'm telling the truth, right? But when it comes to feelings and social norms, this area becomes kind of gray. It's not black and white. It's more of a gray area. And so I want to define the importance and define truth. Okay, so there are two broad categories of truth. So I want to break these down. And this episode, I have some quotes, and I'm trying to be engaging. I've used like this outline here that I'm using today. It's new. I'm kind of changing up how I do it a little bit more. Hopefully, it's a little bit more engaging, and so you can remember, because I know these topics are so like complex, and it's hard to just listen to something and just understand everything that I'm saying. So, subjective truth. The first view on truth is subjective truth. There's two views here, subjective and objective, I guess. Those are the two main views. So the definition of subjective truth is truth based on a person's feelings, preferences, or perspective. So when making a subjectively true statement, the statement may be true in that context, but not universally true. So subjective truth, an example would be cotton candy is the best ice cream flavor. Now that may be true for me, but not necessarily for you. So that's kind of where society is going today. This is where things get confused, because this statement is true. Cotton candy is the best flavor in the world. It is true for me. I personally, I love cotton candy ice cream. It's freaking great. But within its contexts, it's true. So to me, that is true. But universally, we cannot say that cotton candy is the best flavor of ice cream, because that statement is only true to me in this particular context. Now let's go one step further with this, and this is where relativism enters the conversation. So I mentioned relativism in the last episode about knowledge, but I figured it best kind of suits this topic on truth. So relativism is the belief that truth is always relative to the individual or culture. And you may be thinking, that sounds a lot like today's world. Like relativism. Everybody's kind of got their own beliefs and opinions on the world and stuff like that. And on God, so our culture kind of defines what truth is through this relativist view. And in other words, what is true for you is true for you, and what is true for me is true for me. But that's under a subjective view, and I want to outline the problem with subjective truth in this context. So relativism can't account for objective facts and moral absolutes. Relativism often appeals to our desire to be tolerant or non-judgmental or, which is good. Those are good things, to not be judgmental and, be tolerant of people and stuff like that. Those are good things. But if it's taken too far, it erases the possibility of real accountability, real moral accountability. And so this is a big thing in the United States currently, where most truths out in our society are viewed as subjective or relative. And while the form of truth may be true or the right way to view things in some circumstances, these subjective and relativist views, they can be true in some cases. You cannot blanket all truth under this view, because then you start running into some real problems. So let's put a test. I want to put a test to relativism to give you an example of what I mean by you can't just blanket statement all truth as relativist or subjective. So let's test relativism with a real world thought experiment. So in our culture, most Americans would agree that murder is wrong. I'm not talking about killing, but I'm talking about murder, okay? Hold on, pause 1 second. Sorry, I had a phone call. Okay, so let's test relativism in a real-world thought experiment. So in our culture, most Americans agree that murder is wrong, right? But let's say when you take this relativist view and you just kind of blanket it, see, relativism is good, but only in its context, right? So most people today view things more relativist or subjectively than objectively. And the reason why there's problems with that is because this situation right here. So most people would agree that murder is wrong. But let's say someone now this is an extreme example, okay? This doesn't happen every day, but this is just for an easy example, even though it is a bit extreme. So Jeffrey Dahmer, right? A man who murdered multiple people, believed that what he was doing was okay. If Jeffrey Dahmer believed that murdering all these people was okay, then in a purely relativistic framework, he was just living his truth. Now that is a fact. That is how relativism works. So you might say, well, society will still judge him wrong. He went to prison, right? So society disagreed with him. So even though he had this view, society still disagrees with him. Now that is true, but think deeper on this. So what if someone who believes that murder is wrong went to a tribe or a culture where murder is considered a value? Where if their culture says it's right and your culture says it's wrong, who is to say who's right? Who is to say who is right and wrong in this situation? Is murder okay or is murder not okay, right? You get into there's no resolution, because if you're living through a purely relativistic view, who's to say anybody's right or wrong? Because everybody has their own truth, right? Now, in relativism, the answer is neither would be true or both are true. Those are the only possible answers for this dilemma, right? So whatever the culture decides becomes the truth with relativism. And that sounds appealing in terms of tolerance, right? So like that sounds appealing. Like, oh yeah, everybody agrees on this thing. But if there's an outlier, then you're wrong. But that doesn't make that person wrong, and that doesn't make society right. So it becomes deeply unstable and even dangerous when applied to serious moral issues, because it means that relativism means that there's no real standard for right and wrong. Morality becomes whatever the majority of people says it is, and truth becomes a popularity contest of a cultural trend. So that means truth is ever changing, ever growing. It's not tied to reality. It is a cultural preference, I guess, a cultural standard that changes. So in conclusion, I cannot move forward through this journey through a purely relativist view because it does not account for morality and truth. There is too much uncertainty with relativism. And just to be clear, I'm not saying that relativity is purely bad, but if you want to know if this big topic, if God is real, or, morality, things like this, what's right and wrong, if you want to know these things, which is an objective statement that absolutely has to be a yes or a no, a statement that is outside of simple context within my own opinion. So these are things that have to be true or false. They have to be right or wrong. And it's not up to my personal opinion. It is a objective fact that it has to be true or it has to be false. We can't simply say that my truth and your truth unless we define our terms clearly. And find that the topic of discussion fits within the boundaries of subjective or relative view. So if relativism can't provide a solid foundation for morality or existence, where can we turn? And that is where objective truth comes in, my friends. So objective truth is truth that is true regardless of personal opinions or beliefs. So for an example, water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, right? At sea level, I guess. Okay, and this is true whether or not you believe it. This is a factually true statement. You can't say, oh, well, to me, water boils at 50 degrees Celsius, because that is not true. It doesn't align with reality, right? Let's go back to our original definition of truth, which is, where is it? That which is in accordance with reality. So, you can't just believe, you can believe, but you can't just say that water boils at 50 degrees Celsius because it's true for you, because that is a objective fact. It has to be true or false, right? So this means that the topic, is God real, and is morality real, is, what does science say? All these things must have a definite answer, yes or no. Or is this thing right or wrong, right? You can't know without truth. You must have a definite answer, yes or no. And it is not up to opinion because it is outside the context of subjective truth. So the principle of non-contradiction says that something cannot both be true, be and not be in the same way at the same time. In other words, God exists and God does not exist cannot both be true at once. They just can't. Factually, that cannot be true. And the reason objective truth builds our foundation so much stronger is for this reason. So let me explain objective truth through another example. Okay, so slavery is morally wrong. Okay, that is not just a cultural preference, right? That is objectively true or it is false. That is objectively right or wrong. And if we treat truth as subjective, we lose the ability to condemn practices like slavery because someone could say it was right for them. You see what I'm saying? So this is where we get in the weeds, okay? Like this is where things go wrong in society, because if you believe abortion is right for me, and then somebody says abortion is wrong, like that is an objective. It has to be right or wrong. It cannot be a subjective view, right? This is a morality topic. This is not my opinion topic. If you're talking about stealing, is stealing from your best friend right or wrong? Well, it's right for me, and it's wrong for, this person. Who's to say what's right and wrong? So slavery, logically, you cannot say that in the past, if you take this view, you cannot say that people in the past were wrong for doing something they believed was right. If the whole world was viewed things through a subjective relativist view, you cannot say that somebody was wrong in the past for doing what they believed was right. So I see so often people making an argument for moral actions, saying that certain things are okay now when they weren't in the past, or other things aren't okay now that were okay in the past. And they make their argument by saying whatever culture deems right, or whatever they feel is right. But this argument does not hold water, because back in the day, there were many people that believed slavery to be wrong or evil, right? And some believed that they were doing the right thing, or that slavery was okay, right? Now, if you currently believe that slavery always was and always will be, but you also choose to believe that some actions are good because you simply feel they are right or true, then you should take a second to look at what you're believing and come to think about the truth about the actions or beliefs that you hold. So if you believe that everything is right or true because you believe right now, or whatever, you should take a look at your beliefs, the beliefs that you hold, because you cannot view the world through this purely subjective relativist view. You're mixing things up. You are like, if you believe that things are just because you believe them, or things are not, right, good or bad, just because you think so, I think you should take another look at reality. So let's get a quick overview. I know this is kind of a shorter episode. Not all truth is subjective, and subjective truth, which is based on personal preference, and relativism, which is belief that all truth is context bound. So things are true in this context or whatever. You've got objective truth, which is true regardless of opinion. It's true because it is in accordance with reality. And truth about morality and existence or God falls into the objective truth category, because it's not up for personalization. These are objective facts. Objective truth is not about what I believe or feel. And why this matters about God is because God can either be or not be. Morals either are or they are not. Something is right or something is wrong, right? Unless it is in these specific boundaries, right? Either God exists, C.S. Lewis says, this is a C.S. Lewis inspired paraphrase, either God exists or he does not. There is no middle ground. And the answer to that question changes everything. So that is completely true. Either God is real and we should then base the rest of our lives on that fact, or God is not real and we figure out how we live in this world that we live in, right? But I want to leave you with some questions and thoughts to help you kind of solidify all these topics in your own mind. So I know these topics are, pretty hard to, deal with and think about and listen to a lot of the time. And they're confrontational to your core. These topics are confrontational, and I realize that. But there's a quote that goes like this: "If you want to be if you want the truth, you must have the courage to accept it, even when it costs you." So oftentimes, my friends, the truth is hard to face. It is uncomfortable a lot of the time. It is difficult to deal with. It means you need to reshape your identity. It means you need to reshape your life. It means you need to reshape how you view things. Truth is difficult. It is confrontational. It is not comfortable, which is why these topics are not easy. Now, that's why most people don't get into topics like this, because people, like I said in a topic a while ago about relationships, the brain prefers what is known, what it is comfortable with, than facing reality, than facing the truth. Your brain, so a lot of people just turn off to these topics because they don't want to hear how they're supposed to live. They don't want to hear what the truth is, because that would mean discomfort. That would mean reshaping things. That would mean, all these crazy things that is uncomfortable, that is uncertain, right? This is how our brains work, So what do you base your view of right and wrong on? How can you know that what you're believing is true or false, right or wrong? What are you basing reality on? Okay. And George Orwell says, "The further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it." So, my friends, let us be courageous and not run from the hard questions, because many people do. Most people do. Most people don't care to hear these topics. Most people don't care because they know that it is confrontational to what they believe. And if that, is confrontational to what they believe, that means that they are going to have to change how they view things. That means they're going to have to change their lifestyle, their beliefs, right? They're going to have to change a lot of things. It's uncomfortable. So let's not run from the hard questions, and let's ask the hard questions, because without truth, we have nothing to stand on. So, my friends, that is it for our truth episode. I really hope you enjoyed. If you did, I know I'm on YouTube now, so leave a like, comment, subscribe, whatever you got to do. Share it with your friends or whatever. I know these are very philosophical and theoretical, but I do a lot of work into these topics to make them right and accurate, and a lot goes into them. So, yeah. If you made it this far, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you, and I will see you at the next episode, which I believe should be going over morality and stuff like that. I actually have a possibly a bonus episode coming next. I'm going on vacation, so it might be a little while before my next episode. So thank you again for watching. Peace out.